Okay, I'm back, and so now we're finished with the igneous rocks, and so our second kind of rock that we want to look at is going to be called sedimentary rocks. And so here's some examples of sedimentary rocks. Conglomerate, and do you notice the little pebbles that are glued together to make conglomerate? Okay, and then next to it is going to be gypsum, and gypsum, it's going to turn out, is going to form whenever you have a body of water that is evaporating. Okay, another one underneath that is called coquina, and if you look carefully at that picture, you'll notice it's little pieces of shells that have been glued together. And then if you look next to it, you're going to see sandstone. And sandstone is little pieces of sand that have been glued together. So what is going to be the definition of a sedimentary rock? So sedimentary rocks lithify. So lithification is the process by which sediments are going to be either glued together or they're going to precipitate and then are going to crystallize as a sedimentary rock. So that's what we mean by lithify. So sedimentary rocks lithify from sediments, or they're formed from solutions. So what do we mean by sediments? So you take any kind of rock and you subject it to rain or wind or gravity or temperature. So all of these processes that occur at the surface of the earth are going to start to alter that rock. And so it could just cause the rock to fall apart into smaller rocks, or it could start to chemically alter the rock so that the minerals in that rock start to change. Well, one way or another, the rock falls apart into smaller pieces, which we're going to call sediments. Okay, then those sediments can be transported to a place where they accumulate, and then they can be lithified and turned into a sedimentary rock. The other possibility is a solution, so that whenever you have a mineral and then it undergoes chemical weathering, it could turn out that ions could come off the minerals, and then they get into water, and then they are washed either into a lake or an ocean, and then those ions can recombine to turn into crystals of another kind of mineral. So, for example, halite, salt, is a result of when an ocean begins to evaporate and it leaves behind salt crystals. The one that's right next to it, we're going to find out, is very important, and then this is going to be the formation of limestone. So this is going to occur when carbon dioxide in the air mixes with ocean water, and then it combines chemically and then precipitates to the bottom of the ocean, and it's going to turn into the sedimentary rock limestone. So at this point, just get the general idea for how these sedimentary rocks form. So here is an identification chart for different kinds of sedimentary rocks. So again, don't worry about this when you look at this, but notice that sedimentary rocks are classified based on their mineral content and texture. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, we talked about igneous rocks, and we said that igneous rocks were also categorized based on their mineral content and texture. So, for example, let's talk about texture this time. So for a sedimentary rock, texture could refer to the size of the particles that are glued together. So we looked at an example called conglomerate, where it was pebbles, so pea-sized pieces of rock that were glued together. But then we also looked at sandstone. So what's the size of the particles that are glued together? Sand sized. So very, very small. You could even have grains that are so small that you can't even see them with the naked eye, and they're glued together, and then that's going to turn into shale. Then you'll also notice that another type of sedimentary rocks are going to be called chemical sedimentary rocks. So this is going to happen when chemicals combine together and then precipitate down, and then they form these rocks. So we already mentioned limestone is one kind of chemical sedimentary rocks. And then you also have biochemical rocks. So these are going to be based on living organisms. So there are some kinds of living organisms that can extract calcium carbonate from the ocean water and then use that to make their shells. And then when they die, those shells can accumulate on the bottom of the ocean, and then they can be glued together. And then you remember that that was called coquina. Another example of this would be leaves. So if you're in a swamp where you've got trees, and so you've got all of this organic material like leaves, and so like a tree falls over into the swamp, but before it has a chance to rot and to completely decay, another tree falls on top of it, and then another tree falls on top of it. And so what you end up with is buried organic materials that can be squeezed together, and it can be turned into peat, which eventually can be turned into coal. So we'll learn all about this later. So that's what we mean about what is it composed of, and then also what is the texture when it's glued together. So here are some sedimentary environments. So all you have to think about is where are there places on the earth which are subjected to rain and extreme cold or extreme heat or water or ice or wind or wave action. Well, that's basically everywhere. So on the surface of the earth, rocks are constantly being weathered and turned into little pieces, parts. They're then transported normally by water, like in a river, and they normally end up in a large body of water, like a lake or an ocean, where they can settle down, and then they can be glued together to make those sedimentary rocks. All right, in our next segment, we are going to talk about metamorphic rocks.